Hello, beautiful Bravehearts. We have got some bonus episodes coming for you. Enrollment for the Get Over Your Ex in 3 Months or Less program is opening April 6th. And I wanted to kick this week off with some amazing, badass Braveheart alumni. They actually came to the Braveheart Festival and spoke about their experience in 3 different topics. So I thought what it would be fun is if I shared that content, because the Braveheart Festival is inside of the Get Over Your Ex program. So if you want to watch those in full, you can get them inside of the program. But I wanted you to hear their experiences because they were so good. And they gave 3 different kind of miniature lessons around 3 different topics. We've got Reanna talking about the relationship with yourself and how you can rebuild that after a breakup. We've got Sarah, who's talking about the home buying process and how it felt impossible to her, and she eventually ended up being able to buy her dream home in less than 3 months, which is just so cool. And I want to say that, the housing market is different depending on where you live. And we just want to acknowledge that this isn't necessarily like legal advice in any way, shape, or form. It was just her experience. So just adding that disclaimer here. And then lastly, we also have Lisa, who is going to be talking about dating after 50 and getting really excited about your future without your ex in it. So 3 amazing, beautiful topics, 3 different lessons, all to help us kick off enrollment opening for the Get Over Your Ex in 3 Months or Less program. I am so excited to meet this next cohort, of Bravehearts who are joining us in the program. This is the place to not only get over your ex, but to also guarantee yourself a life that is bigger and better than the one that you had with your ex. I cannot wait to meet you guys. I am sending you all the love, and I will talk to you next time. Welcome to How to Get Over Your Ex, a podcast on getting over your ex without it just taking time. I'm your host, Breakup Coach Dorothy. Let's turn your pain into power and your heartbreak into happy.
Amazing. Thank you, Dorothy. I love you too. And honestly, I can't say thank you enough for everything you do. So I'm super excited to be here with you guys. I went through pillar 2 to prepare for this. So what I did is I did take notes, but so if I'm looking down, that's why, because there's so much deliciousness in there that I wanted to make sure I covered. But if I end up just getting off track or just talking with you guys, thank you for your patience. And then 2, I really want it to be as interactive as possible. So if you have questions as I'm talking, like either put a hand up or just interrupt me, I'm all about it. This pillar completely actually changed my life, which I can go into a little more, but there was a point through my just mental health and breakup that I was having suicidal ideation. This is something, I talked about with Dorothy, that, not only was it a place of like saving my life yet again, but it genuinely changed the relationship I had with myself and thus the entire trajectory of my life. So before I get to going into it, I wanted to see if everyone was open to just taking, I'm going to call it like a mindful minute. This is something that I even do just as we talk about building the relationship with self. If you're on camera, or you want to go off, you can go off camera for a minute or just close your eyes. And just take a minute to be with you for a second. The pain of heartbreak is something that none of us will ever be able to truly put into words. Whether you did the breaking up or they did, just take all of that pain for a second, wherever it is in your body. You can just be with it, allow it. And then for just a second, I want you to pick it up and put it over to the side. Just be with your body and everything you know in your truth. Just go ahead and take a big inhale in. Thank yourself for doing the work, for showing up today, every day, even if it looks like you're crying some days, you're still showing up for you. And when you're ready, you can go ahead and make your way back into your body, into the room. So Thank you guys so much. So my story is a little bit different in the sense that I kind of put this story moving forward. I am back with my then ex. So that's something that I know, this program is built for really you, whether it's to get over the breakup or to build a new relationship within that person. You can really make it whatever it is that's right for you. So what happened with me in my story is basically I wasn't truly ready for a relationship, but there was this amazing woman who I genuinely fell for. And she loved me so deeply that when I look back now, I had been pushing her away for so many reasons. I mean, just like I wasn't nice. I didn't show up the way that I wanted to. And in retrospect, especially after doing this program, it was like, wow, I wasn't ready to receive that depth of love because I couldn't receive that love for myself. And I think that's where things really started to shift for me in just, as I was going through the program, her and I weren't talking, that I wasn't necessarily like, I'm doing this to specifically get back with her, but I would be lying if I told you that there wasn't a part of me that wanted to get back with her. And I'm sure, a lot of you guys could relate with that too, in possibly wanting it to work with your ex someday, or whether it is that person or a new person. So it was tricky because I was the one who, I guess, technically did more of the breaking up part. That I don't think a lot of people talk about this side of it, of the whole, like, the person who left is in just as much pain as the other. And granted, I'm sure it's two completely different pains, and I don't want to take that away. But I was absolutely heartbroken. I just was absolutely crushed. And I started searching, of course, for the podcast, and came along Dorothy. And there was just a point that I was just sold. So before I even really dove into Pillar 2, Dorothy had held a workshop of the opinions of others. And that was kind of like what she was just talking about. And that was the turning point. As much as like feeling the feels really was helpful for me. There was a moment in that workshop where, and I don't know if she's still doing it, but it's the essence either way. And just like finding out your truth about yourself. There was just so much strength in there for me, because I had spent so much time ruminating about what my ex was thinking about me and what her friends were thinking about me and the things that I had did and said. And it was just like, once I took I took 10 things out of that workshop that were so true for me, I knew were true, that I call them anchor thoughts. I don't remember exactly what, but I call it like an anchor thought, where there was one truth in there. And actually there was one, Dorothy, I don't know if you know this, but you had named yours. And I was like, oh, like that resonates. Yeah. 10 truths about you. Thank you. And the one that was just like, the one that took me home was, it basically was, I make mistakes and I F up, but I'm a really good human with a good heart. And that just took me the rest of the program. I mean, that's something that I still stick with me today when I do make a terrible mistake, is like, okay, like I made a mistake in my perspective, and I'm still like, I'm doing my best, and we're all doing our best. And I think for me, it was such a humbling moment in my own personal journey of self, because I strove, like, whether it was being an athlete or this kind of scholar, like I did everything I could to always have perfection within myself. And there was this humbling moment where it was just like, oh, I'm allowed to make mistakes. It's like this very embracing hug to humanity. It allowed me to be a human and have these experiences. So I guess I started opening up to like the grace within myself. For that, before I move on, I want to check in. Is there any questions or anything or comments on any of that?
Reanna, I'd actually be really curious. Do you have your 10 truths? Would you be open to sharing them?
Yeah, I do.
So, and just to give a little bit of context, so for those of you who missed yesterday but are here today, welcome. So excited you made it. We talked about the Get Over Your Ex framework and the different pillars that have to be addressed to get over your ex and build a bigger and better life. Remember that pillar 1 is all about the scary stories that you have about feeling feelings, how to process emotion. We did that in the afternoon. pillar 2, which is what Reanna is talking about, is what are you making the breakup mean about you? What are you making that relationship mean about you? And the stories that you have then internalized and identified with, maybe based off of what your ex has said about you or how you view your own self within that relationship. Pillar 3 is all about closure and letting go. And like, what does that actually mean? Rewriting your breakup story. And then pillar 4 is all about the disempowering stories you have about your future. But when Reanna is talking about this workshop, there's a workshop inside of the Get Over Your Ex program all about opinions of others and how to stand strong in your own truths when other people have maybe negative views of you. Because I know that, I mean, I'm actually very curious. How many of you have an ex who like has a very negative view of you, or you think has a negative view of you now after the breakup, and you're like really concerned about it? Anyone? Lisa? Sierra? Yeah, some people struggle with this where you maybe didn't show up in the best way and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I am really sad that I didn't like I can see the truths in what my ex is saying about me and it's really hard for me to like overcome that." So, there's a lot of shame and guilt in that. And that's kind of what Rihanna was talking about. And within this workshop, one of the things, and I really highly recommend you do this even today with Rihanna as you listen to hers, is what are the 10 real truths that I can believe about myself no matter what? No matter what anyone else says, no matter what happens in my life, what are 10 truths I can really just in my body believe at all times? And getting really clear about that so you have them and write them down. Sarah, you said mine absolutely hated me for the whole year we broke up and was the hardest part of the breakup. Yeah. And based off of what you experienced yesterday too, of like, there's a lot of emotion around that. That makes total sense, Sarah. Lisa, I showed up at my best and it wasn't enough for him. See, and that even happens, right? Leslie, I have the opposite. He thinks I'm amazing and I'm left with, I'm so amazing. Why did he leave? That's interesting, right? Yeah. How do you figure out those truths? Well, there's a number of questions that I ask within the workshop and guide you through. Okay, first I'm going to have Rihanna go ahead and give her 10. And then we'll work from there. I'll help you guys create some.
Yeah, this is really cool because it was absolute game changer for me. So I'm just gonna use the F word because it makes it more real for me. So I'm just gonna preface. Okay, so my 10 truths are: I'm really good at listening and asking questions. I fuck up and I know that I have a really kind heart and I'm always learning. When I put my mind to something, I literally can achieve anything. I'm allowed to have a really incredible, blissful, happy life. I can make friends with anyone at any age. I take responsibility and ownership when I make mistakes. I help people think outside the box or see new perspectives. I'm getting better every day at being and expressing my vulnerabilities when appropriate, of course. I'm really thoughtful. I'm really good at remembering the things about people when they tell me things about them.
I love it. So, Rihanna, my question then is, how did you come up with those?
I do think that the questions that you were asking really helped, but what came up for me was I did have such a deep fear of the things that my ex was saying and the things that her friends were possibly saying about me that I actually, like, when we were in the workshop and I was writing it, I had almost taken myself and looked at all of her friends, like in my mind's eye, with the fear of judgment and the shame and the guilt that I had with me, and said, if all of these things, even if all these things were true, where can I still find love within myself? Where can I still look at myself and say, hey, you know what, maybe I did mess up and say that, but I'm still a good person, or I'm still a good listener. And it helped shift the humanness of the things that I did, quote unquote, wrong, to still being worthy enough.
That's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah.
Even if this was true, then what? And that's something, as we looked at models yesterday, you guys, that's something that if a thought is feeling really true for you, ask yourself, if this is true, then what? we still have options. There are still options beyond, even if that feels really true for you. What are the options after that then? So what? Why is that a problem? Were you going to say something, Reanna?
That was a huge thing that I used too. But another incredible technique that you taught me was making meaning of it. Like, what am I making this mean about myself? And that shifted everything too, because I mean, I use that. So basically what the concept is like, if you do have a thought about whether what your ex is saying or this person saying or how you showed up, like, well, what am I making this mean about myself? It gets you to stop the thought train, because I know we all, at least for me, I get caught in this thought train. It just goes, 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 goes. It made me stop and be like, well, what am I making this mean about myself? And is it true? And there were two things that come up from the program that really helped with that, is that thoughts are not facts. So even if I am thinking it, like, unless I can pull up tangible percentages, mathematics, or whatever to show me that the thought is true, it doesn't necessarily need to be something I believe. And the second is just making meaning to something can come in so many forms, in that I still use this to today. Even if I'm like, oh, I shouldn't eat the nachos because of this, and this. I'm like, well, if I eat the nachos, what am I making that mean about myself? Right. So it's like, it's such an expansive self building technique or tool that really changed.
It's a skill, right? And I think that that's the beauty of that, is like learning the skill of remembering to pause and ask yourself what's like the deeper meaning here.
Yeah. Or where's the judgment coming from? Like, where am I not loving myself in this moment?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was really helpful for me.
I love that. Okay, I want to let Reanna continue, and you guys, I'll make a note about the 10 truths, and if someone wants to come on later and like work on their 10 truths with me during the coaching today, we can do that.
Cool. Thank you. So in that pillar 2 we were talking about, it starts really with the relationship with yourself. And there was something that Dorothy wrote in her like introduction paragraph about it that I have written down. And she was talking about how before she did her self-work, she was open about how like she used to think that other people could love her better, whether it was like her mom or her person at the time, or this person or this person. And I wrote down this quote because I resonated with it. And it was like, it was easier to outsource that, because if something went wrong, it surely wasn't my fault. It was theirs. And I resonated that in the sense that like, there's this responsibility that you take when you acknowledge that, or at least again, what I went through, there was this just like responsibility when I realized that I am the source of my relationship with self and thus with everybody. And although that put a lot of responsibility on myself, it also was like so freeing, because there was this concept then that whether it was, if it was this relationship with my ex, like as much as I could have so deeply continued to be like drastically shifted by the things that were happening, I realized that I was the one responsible for my feelings because of my thoughts and because of the way that I felt about myself, whether it was that I was making meaning about things or the stories I was telling myself. I mean, when you're sitting here and you're going through the healing process, you really don't know what your ex is thinking or going through. And I think that that's something that I really had to sit with too. Social media was no help in that. I will be the first to admit. That one was really tough, that I had to learn. Even, I mean, I came to some sessions with Dorothy being like, oh, this is what I saw on social media, so this is what it must mean about me, and she must be like, just on. And we just had to keep peeling back the layers and be like, well, what about you? Like, what are you making this mean about you right now? So another part of the relationship with self that we were kind of just talking about is, what are we tying our worth to? And so there was an exercise that we did where I put down the things that I tied my worth to. And as much as this is vulnerable, I'd rather share than not. And it was, I put my worth on my body, on money, on my career, on school, and on my heart. And those were all things that kind of put me in an awakening. As much as those things are, we're here for a human experience in striving for maybe an education or a good job, or like those things that we want to achieve. they don't define my worth. And for me to have to like sit back and recognize that too, and kind of take my ego out of the equation and just accept that I am worthy as I am, was also a huge, huge shift in my journey. And a part of this too was accepting that I'm not perfect. And I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but it was just like, again, such a striving to be this perfect human, whether it was in school or work or as a daughter or a girlfriend. That I think when I looked back on my relationship and felt so much pain for showing up the way that I did, this part of my forgiveness was like, dang, Ree, like, I see that you did these things. And I know that you're really unhappy about the way that you showed up, but it doesn't take away your worth as just a human being. So just in the space of like giving yourself that grace, if you will. Let's see. This one was fun because the question that's posed is regarding appreciating yourself. I almost wonder as I say that out loud, and I kind of have a question for you guys. Do you feel like there's a difference between loving yourself and appreciating yourself? If so, what would you describe the difference as? I saw some head nods. I know there's something good out there. All right, I'll say my opinion then, because everybody wants to talk at once. I think the difference between like loving self and appreciating self, at least for where I'm at in this part of the journey, is almost the love that I have for myself now is so stable and constant, where appreciating self is almost like an activity I get to do, where I get to like actively recognize the things that I appreciate myself. And so one of the questions that's posed in the program is, what is the downside to appreciating yourself no matter what? Oh, wait, I'm going to read Jessica's. She said, I think when you appreciate yourself, you may express your appreciation in more tangible ways, like give yourself a break. Yeah, exactly. Like that active appreciation, or buying yourself something nice. Exactly. I love that. Thanks, Jessica. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. That's funny. Okay. Yes, celebrate ourselves. I love that. Like, what would life look like if you did something every day to show yourself appreciation, right? And that goes so big too, because when we get into a relationship, we want so much to show our partner how much we love and appreciate them. And so we do all these, whether it's acts of service or loving words, and we give and give and give. When do we stop and do that for ourselves throughout the day? Like, I think we try to show up so much for this other person that we have to remember it's within us too. Let's see, Julie says, loving is unconditional. Appreciation lies in the small moments that may go unrecognized by others. 100%, right? Sometimes, like in conversation, you say things that you're like, oh, wow, like, I really like that I said that. Like, even just giving yourself that little recognition is so powerful. It's like, whatever you would do for your partner, come and do that for yourself tenfold, because eventually, it's so cliche, but you have to keep your cup full in order to pour. Like, you can't pour from an empty cup. Cool. Thank you guys for engaging. That was fun. The question is what's the downside to appreciating yourself no matter what? And I wanted to share what I wrote. And it was that the downside is almost a fear of having that unconditional love in a world that taught us how much of our worth is based on conditions. It's almost like it gives me so much freedom that it's like an invitation to authentically be my entire self. And when I think about that, I can feel my heart wanting to open and dance with joy. And there's a side of fear sitting on my shoulder. And I wanted to bring that up because I personally have just spent so much time, whether it's in relationship or just with self, not showing up to my full capacity, and maybe having resentment or just so much fear within self that if I did show up as the full expression of me, I might not be loved, or I might be too much, or whatever they might think. that appreciating all of myself again gave myself that permission to really just be and know that at the end of the day, I'm with me, and that the people who are going to be in my circle are going to be in my circle. Yeah, does that make sense? Can I get like a nod? Yeah, okay, I got some nods, some yeses. Thanks, guys. So all that being said, there's also this other part where you get to ask yourself like a really look in the mirror question, and kind of like that making meaning-esque is like, what am I making this breakup? Yeah, Libby said, I've always got my own back. Yes, exactly. The question is, what am I making this breakup mean about me? And this one was so hard for me. And whatever the situation is that you're going through, I mean, we all at this point, when you're going through the healing process and you're reflecting on the relationship, I think we all kind of look and see the things that we wish we'd done differently, or they like, there's so much thought into it. And for me, I was making the relationship basically mean that I wasn't worthy, or that I was stupid or ignorant. And those things weren't really in my line of values anymore with how I wanted to show up for myself. That once I kind of made that decision to switch my thoughts, the emotions changed, which of course is like how everything works, is the thoughts and the emotions that come with it. And valuing the relationship with myself. There's another part of the program in this section of Pillar 2 where you get to really look at different aspects of your relationship with yourself, whether it's through like intimacy or your vulnerability. Like, how do you show up with yourself on a day-to-day, and what does that relationship look like? And those are things that, I mean, I wish they taught this kind of stuff in school, like as a kid, right? It's like, how, and maybe this is naive of me to say, but I almost don't know how it's possible at this point to truly love another until you don't have to be, I don't think, madly in love with yourself, because I think we're always a work of art, but to at least just be able to be with yourself. Yeah, I wish they taught this in school too. It's so powerful when we're able, and again, it's not always this like constant appreciation that I'm with myself every single second, being absolutely head over heels in love with myself. It's such a deep grounding love that I can look at myself and say, hey, I didn't really like the way you did. I still love you, but I didn't really like the way you did that. Like, let's take this lesson and show up a little differently next time. And I think that too has just shifted everything for me. I like this question. Does your self-love mean that the faulty thoughts are not coming up anymore? This is an awesome question. I think it's a twofold answer. So I can only speak for myself. I love this question so much. I'm going to say no. I'm going to be very honest with you that I still hear the thoughts. I absolutely still hear the thoughts. Are they, excuse me, are they less quiet? Yes. But what I've learned in my unfolding is I kind of think of it like a leveling up. So the way I think of it is like where I was in the breakup and the thoughts were so loud about X, Y, and Z. I got to look at those thoughts and change my relationship with the thoughts. And as I continued to love myself through those thoughts, some other self-love thoughts would come up, or some other criticizing thoughts would come up. And one thing that kind of helps me in that navigation, and something that Dorothy really talks about in the program too, is how our brains are meant to be solving problems. So sometimes when I hear thoughts coming up of whether it's like anxiety, or do I look good in this outfit, or you showed up like shit today, like, what is the problem my brain is trying to solve in this moment? Like, and the second question I might, for me, ask myself is like, do I really believe this? Like, if I were talking to a 3-year-old right now, and that 3-year-old is inside me, like, would I ever actually tell that 3-year-old this mean thought? So, but the essence is that the self-love is such a deep practice every day that I can sit with those thoughts and not have to believe them. Yeah. It's a constant practice, but I think that's the essence, is just being with self so deeply that I don't have to believe every thought, because not every thought is a fact. Does that make sense? Or is there any other like questions or comments on that?
That's one of my favorite questions, Rihanna, is the problem one. And another follow-up to that. So Rihanna has the follow-up of, do I want to believe it? But you can also, if your brain is really like fixated on this belief, I think another one that's really fun to look at is not only what is the problem my brain is trying to solve, but is believing this getting me closer to solving the problem? Like, am I getting closer to solving this problem by believing this or not? And most often you'll notice, obviously, you're not. And then it's like, what's the point then? Why do I keep chewing on this? It's like a chew toy.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a good analogy. Thank you. Okay. So one of the last parts of pillar 2 in this, of building a relationship with self, and this isn't too long of a section, it hit me so hard, and it's called, are you in it for the long haul? And that's talking about the relationship with self. And there's a part in when Dorothy's explaining what this means, is she even mentions like, am I with me till death do we part? Like, do I really have me, period? And this it made me kind of open my eyes, because I had never asked myself a question as such. Like, we think about our whole lives as kids, if we're thinking about getting married to that certain person, we think over and over, like that moment where we hear the person saying, till death do they part, and you say, I do, but I haven't taken the time to say I do to myself. And when I remember just doing this exercise, being like, holy shit, like if I'm here in this body with this heart and mind and soul for the entire lifetime, like, do I got me no matter what? And if I do, even if I do have all these mistakes and things that I did and the ways that I showed up, I have two options. I can decide to hear those thoughts and ridicule and punish myself every single day, or I can take those lessons and I can say, okay, I didn't do exactly what I wanted. I love you regardless. How can I take these lessons and bring them into tomorrow and do better and show up better tomorrow? And doing that was really powerful work, and it held a lot of space for forgiveness. And I think that was where, more than anything, as much as there was so much self-love in place, learning how to forgive myself was quite literally like a saving grace to my life. That I didn't even know like what true forgive. I mean, we spend time learning how to forgive others, and that's such an outward lesson. But I mean, I personally don't remember being taught like, you're going to make mistakes and it's going to be okay. It was more of a lesson of like, if other people hurt you, or like, say sorry, there was so much around other that I didn't have that lesson within self, or had that skill within self to truly forgive myself. And that goes into trusting myself too. And that's probably like the zinger I'll leave on top of all this, is building my relationship with trust. And that speaks to a few things that, again, we go over in the program, which is trust with self and trust with, in my case, I'm going to call it the universe, but like trust in a higher power, trust in something bigger and greater that does not mess up and always has our greatest interest in mind. That once I built that like forgiveness and trust aspect, that also was when things started shifting. And I know time is kind of coming to a close, but that was around the time actually that my ex and I started to rekindle, was when I truly in my body loved myself. Like there was just such a space of forgiveness and trust that it was like, yes, I want my ex back so badly. And I still had some of that desire and attachment with her. But I knew so much that I was just going to do everything I could for me. So that way, and we talked about this even in the program before I like really got it. I knew that if there was going to be a day that I showed up with her, I wanted to show up in a way that I had never done before. And I couldn't do that as the old version of me in our old relationship, that like, I still stick to this get over your ex essence, because I had to get over that whole relationship in order to move into not only the relationship I have with myself now, but the relationship with her. And it has quite literally been the most incredible, rewarding journey within self and with my partner. And it's a brand new relationship in every way. And it is so deeply attributed to being able to look at my thoughts and my heart and show up in this program and in this space and with myself. And it has drastically made the difference. Yeah. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for her, or any tips or things that you're like, oh my gosh, I wish tell me more about this? I want to make sure that all of you get your answers.
Yeah, I would love that. Oh, thanks, guys.
Isn't it such a great community? Y'all are amazing. So kind.
Yeah, I think what's powerful too is there is something so raw about a breakup. There is something so just delicate and powerful though about a breakup that brings you to a place within self of just deep self-reflection, whether it was, again, your choice to leave or their choice. It's such an invitation to just really look at yourself. Let's see, what's the number? It's from Aaron. What's the number one tip you would give for increasing your self-love? For me, it was acceptance. It was deep, utter acceptance. And in that acceptance came a willingness to shift, a willingness to really look at myself. And something that was almost like a bridge for me in truly loving self was asking myself how I might show up with others. Would I be treating somebody who I loved very, very deeply with these words, or would I be punishing that? Does that kind of make sense? How would I show up for my best friend? How would I love my partner through this? That kind of helped me be oh, I would never, ever say that to my partner. Why would I ever say that to myself? And it's a constant practice for sure. I hope that helps, Erin. If not, let me know. I'm happy to talk more. Allie says, I see forgiving myself as agreeing with the thoughts that I did so much wrong. How do we forgive ourselves, but not also fully blame ourselves and agree with those thoughts? Ooh, that was me, sister. Oh my gosh. Okay. I see myself forgiving myself as agreeing with the thoughts that I did so much wrong. Before I speak to that fully, am I hearing that you still think that the things that you did were wrong and then work through accepting them, but not fully blaming? Is that kind of what you're talking about, Allie? I'll speak to that if so, and then if you chime in, just correct me if I'm wrong. Because what I see from this is I still, as I was going through it, I thought that the things that I did and the way I showed up in the relationship, it still was, I'm going to use quote unquote wrong because it's not aligned with my values. There's a big, beautiful lesson in the program too about there really is no quote unquote right or wrong, because there's always a lesson for self in that journey. But needless to say, when I look back and I say that the things that I did were wrong, it was that they were wrong again, like I said, in how I want to show up. So I still had I have those thoughts. I don't like the way that I did that. I absolutely don't like the way that I did X, Y, and Z. And I really didn't know better at that time. For me, that was how I, got through it. And even if there were moments where I was damn, Ray, I probably could have done better in that moment. Okay, am I gonna try? I guess it was just a matter of looking at what my options were at that point. And again, kind of what I said earlier, do I want to continue my suffering in punishing myself over and over and over and over and over again? Is this the rest of my life that I want to lead? Or is it something where I can fully just accept and say, hey, you know what, Reanna, I really didn't like that you did that. And if you promise to look at it and take the lesson and try your best again tomorrow, even if it's not perfect, I'm going to work on forgiving you for that. And we're just going to keep moving forward. Uh, I hope
I'd
that
love
helps.
to piggyback off of that because I think one of the biggest things that we don't recognize is that sometimes I think that our minds believe if we beat ourselves into the ground, almost like beat ourselves into submission, we'll show up differently next time. Like if I talk really poorly to myself, being like, we can't do that. That's so dumb. Why did you do that? Even if you did know better, even if you, because we're never going to show up perfect. Even if you did know better, you did know thoughts create feelings and like you still chose those thoughts that then created a feeling and an action that you weren't super proud of. You're human and you're going to do that, and beating yourself up over something that's already happened in the past only creates a negative present result. It's not going to change behavior. It's almost like even if we just come down to like the basics of psychology, negative reinforcement versus positive reinforcement and the differences between that. I remember reading a study about how it was like someone was learning a new skill and they looked at the difference between like someone reviewing their new skill being like, oh, you were terrible at hula hooping, that was so terrible, you're absolutely like miserable, never try that again, like I can't believe you did that, that was so dumb, like they didn't come back and try it again, versus the individuals who were fed with positive reinforcement of like, oh my gosh, like that wasn't, there's some areas for improvement, but you did really great try or whatever. They came back and tried it again, and they were more apt to excel in hula hooping. And so it's like, it's the same thing with your internal chatter of like, is there any downside to forgiving yourself? Forgiving yourself is releasing anger and resentment. And is there any downside to forgiving yourself? So I feel like I just wanted to follow up with that because I think sometimes we're like thinking that if I hold on to the anger and resentment, I'll make sure that I never show up that way ever again. When in reality, like you're perpetuating the problem in the present moment based off of past behavior. I hope that makes sense.
Big time. It was beautifully said. Yeah.
Okay, Reanna, do you have anything else? Any last words to add?
No, this was absolutely amazing. I'm super grateful that I was able to be here. I mean, obviously the work that I did with Dorothy literally changed my life and led me to a whole different just aspect of myself. That I'm also just happy to chat if anyone ever wants to chat about stuff like this or self-worth. This is definitely something I'm passionate about and just what I do and who I am, that I am just so grateful for this opportunity and chance. And I appreciate you guys. Thank you. Thank you, Dorothy.
Yes, thank you so much for coming in and chatting about it. There's so many things that we can cover when it comes to the relationship with yourself. So I appreciate you and talking about your experience.
Thank you so much.
If you're loving the How to Get Over Your Ex podcast and you want to learn how to get over your ex in 3 months or less to build a life better than the one you thought you had with your ex, I would like to personally invite you to my next group course where we take everything you've learned here on the podcast and apply it to your life. Come check it out at www.lifecoachdorothy.com.